David Pakman apparently thought it was a great thing that he was invited to the White House to meet Joe Biden. Don't believe me? Check it out, fam. He tweeted it, not me. I was recently part of a small group of independent media creators and influencers invited to meet with the president and other administration officials at the White House. I do not expect to be invited back to the White House for quite some time. He's referring to because the Trump administration is coming in. This part right here, I was recently part of a small group of independent media creators and influencers. None of the creators and influencers that were invited to meet with Joe Biden were independent. First thing, none of the creators and influencers that met with Joe Biden are independent. How are you independent if you're taking sponsorships? David Pakman takes sponsorships. It's not a secret. Notice it says a small group. These people are not independent. I will continue to say that over and over again. Not independent. And ideally, I said just that. Real independent media isn't invited to the White House. Pakman is a tool for the establishment, and this is peak access journalism. He's not a threat to the status quo, and that is why he's there. And everyone has to understand that. The reason why he's there is because, number one, access journalism. He is heavily covered for the Biden administration. He is heavily kissed up to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Don't forget, David Pakman is a Zionist. Don't forget his position about Israel and Gaza, how David is totally fine with Israel being there, which I don't think they should be. He's totally fine with that. May have criticized some of the war, doesn't think it is a genocide. David Pakman is a full out Zionist. So keep that in mind when you look at who is brought to the White House. Not independent, though. He's not independent. Do you see how some of these YouTubers like Pakman, who at one point in time were independent, do you see how they're changing what it means to be independent? Now, all of a sudden, it used to be, particularly in the progressive space, he used to be progressive. I don't know if he calls himself that anymore, but he's definitely, swung over to the more establishment dim side because it was more profitable. At one point, he was a Bernie supporter, too. He decided to go along with where the money was. Don't get it twisted. But how are you progressive if you don't call for a free Palestine? How are you progressive if you won't call it what it is, occupation and oppression? How are you progressive if you stop calling out the billionaire money like you used to? Now, all of a sudden, it's okay. Never forget that. He is a tool of the establishment and not a threat. Then he went on to proceed to talk about what it was like when he met with Joe Biden. Like, he really ate this up. And this is not the first time he was invited to the White House. He was invited there before to meet with Kamala Harris just over a year ago. Do you think when he sat in that room with Biden or Kamala Harris, do you think David Pakman decided to hold them accountable? Of course not. That's why he was invited. Listen to this.
As far as the show is concerned, which is that yesterday I was in Washington, D.C. and met with President Joe Biden. So let me tell you what this was all about. And I think there are some important takeaways here with regard to the next 4 years and so many things that we've all been talking about. So first and foremost, what was the context of this meeting? I went for a meeting with administration officials from what's called the Office of Digital Engagement. Now, for folks who have been following prior White Houses, there has been no such thing in the past. And so one of the things I've said that's been notable about the Biden White House is that such an office exists, a group of people specifically designed to be intermediaries between the administration and online creators like me as an alternative to the legacy corporate media being the only media apparatus that is even kept informed about what's going on at the White House or has access to the president.
Pause right there. Listen up, turtleneck. Because number one, you're not an alternative. You used to be. The Dave Pakman show back in the day, years ago, used to be an alternative. You're not. How are you an alternative when you repeat the same talking points on corporate media? Once upon a time, he didn't used to do that. So you're no longer an alternative. You're on YouTube, but David Pakman's also on Roku. Stop saying that. Everyone say it with me. He is not an alternative. I'm trying to tell you guys about these shows on YouTube that are disguised as an alternative or independent, and they have the same talking points as corporate media when it comes to imperialism, when it comes to war. Hell, if you couldn't get Gaza right, that right there is a big red flag to people. Should have been. There's a reason why David was there. There's a reason why David was invited there. This is peak access journalism. Do you think that after that, David Pakman is going to harshly criticize the Democratic Party? Hells no. And I've been one that have interviewed candidates on this show, but I've also held them accountable. I supported Jill Stein. I voted for Jill Stein. But when Jill Stein came on the show, I held her accountable with some of the things that happened in her campaign too. Jill, unlike some others, are still willing to come on and have the conversation, even if they know you have some things that you disagree with. The Dem establishment types, the Republican, the staff, they're not willing to do that. So David is now bought and paid for by the Democratic Party. Does everybody follow me here? David Pakman is not going to be critical of the Democratic Party, even when they are in the wrong. What David Pakman is going to do is he'll be heavily critical against the Republican Party, as he has been. But in order to maintain his access, which he's not going to want to let go, he's going to let the Democrats slide even when they are wrong. That meeting with Joe Biden, that handshake that David Pakman gave to Joe Biden was a, I got you. That's how access works.
Now, I will give you the good and then the not so good. The fact that it was a group of 10 of us, myself included, were invited was a great thing because it means they understand the importance, particularly in the context of Kamala Harris recently having lost an election in which she did not engage with online media, I would argue, anywhere approximating what should have been done. It's a sign that they understand the importance. It's a sign that they want to build these relationships. And of course, a lot of you are probably saying, but David, they just lost and they've got a month to go. And of course, that's really the problem. And I would kind of explain it this way. I spoke very candidly with everybody about what the right is doing correctly, how they build community. You know, one of the things we've seen post-election is that everybody who has been in the kind of Trump media ecosystem, they're all part of a very clear community. They're hanging out by the pool at Mar-a-Lago. They're obviously going to have significant access to Trump and top administration officials once they are sworn in.
Right. Which means that you are going to have access to more of the Democrat politicians. You see how he lays it all out there for you?
Comparatively, I expressed this was not to President Biden. We only had about 15 minutes with President Biden, all 10 of us. But we had 2 hours total, plus then a lunch for a smaller group of us. I expressed my frustrations. As you all know, this is not anything that I've not been public about before, where when we want to have Pete Buttigieg on, the Secretary of Transportation, or when we've asked for interviews with others, we are either ignored or put into a sort of scheduling black hole where you're asked, what questions will you be asking? To which
So here is David Pakman letting you know exactly what I just told you. It's all about access. David Pakman wants to bring on Pete Buttigieg. He wants to talk to Booty. He wants to talk to dudes like Booty. I want to be in the club. That's what David wants to do. We want you to do the same thing that Republican politicians are doing for the, explosive, large podcasters on the right. It's all about access. If he wants to maintain that access, he's going to have to kiss their ass. He's going to have to be give very, very soft criticism if they're in the wrong. That's how this works, ladies and gentlemen. I know. And I don't even have to, I haven't been doing this for a long time. I started this show in 2021, but I can tell you, I know. There's a reason why they ain't coming on this show. There's a reason why they're not coming on to the Sabs show. Rokana did. Rokana is the only one that will go into any, he don't care if it's small show, whatever, he'll do it. But for the most part, they're not trying to come over here, boo.
I always say, I'm not going to tell you that. That's not how we do interviews. Can you do it at this one particular time 3 weeks from now? Sure. And then 3 days before, it's rescheduled. And then it's rescheduled again. And by the time we finally get to the interview, everybody's exhausted from the whole thing. They tell you get 9 minutes. And it's not good for anybody. It doesn't build community. It doesn't give us an opportunity to actually build relationships with these people. Nobody's happy with the interview. It doesn't do well. And it just benefits nobody. It's just an exercise in frustration. Contrast that with Charlie Kirk texts Trump. Charlie Kirk texts whoever. Now, I'm not saying give me Biden's cell phone number, but the point is we are so far from the idea that we need to do community first and then let's figure out the details. They were extraordinarily receptive. And yet, the Harris campaign, which is a different entity, I think it's important. A lot of people may not know the president and vice president, separate staffs. They are not working in concert the way some might imagine. They're not a unit in the sense they really have their own things. And the Harris.
Pause. Didn't Joe Biden make it very clear that him and Kamala Harris worked together on most things and that she was in the decision room when he was making these decisions, especially the foreign policy ones that people were complaining about? And here's David Pakman telling you, well, they don't really move to work together. Biden let the ball drop on that one and told everybody she was there for all of those things. So there's that. He don't want Biden's phone number. He's like, I don't want his phone number, but Charlie Kirk can text Donald Trump and da-da-da. Do you guys see what this is? Number one mistake, he says, well, the left doesn't have that. Biden and Kamala are not left. David Pakman knows this because he was once a real progressive and he supported Bernie Sanders and all that jazz, was all a part of that progressive movement. Then in 2020, he started leaning towards Elizabeth Warren and he started telling people to vote for Joe Biden, so he was moving with the money and all that jazz too. But David Pakman knows they're not left. And David Pakman, as a so-called independent, which I told you he's not, but he's calling himself independent podcaster, is trying to convince his audience that that is what the left is. He knows that they are not. Why is he doing that? If you dilute what it means to be left, everything that really is left will be seen as radical and fringe. Say it to me again. Say it with me. If you dilute what is left, what it means to be left, everything that actually is left will be called radical and fringe. So if he can convince you that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are left, then you will look at people like Bernie Sanders, who wants universal health care, which I think a lot of people want, looking at the exit polls before. You might be convinced that that's radical and extreme. Everybody see how this works? They are moving it closer and closer away from what it really means to be left. And the Democratic Party has moved further to the right. And David Pakman, who claims to be independent, which he's not, is doing the work for the establishment as well.
This campaign completely failed on this. And I was extremely clear and candid here as well. So there is certainly a bit of a too little, too late sort of reality here. And it was also very interesting to hear Joe Biden clearly know about what we're doing, understand and talk about the platforms, realize why it is that it makes sense to engage with us. And listen, I know it's sort of like, oh, great. 4 years from now, my hope would be that whoever is the nominee, particularly if it is someone younger, that will even more understand the sort of importance of these online platforms. Hopefully, they will from the beginning engage with us. Now, what was our ask? One of the great things I believe that came out of yesterday's meeting was making it clear that, hey, listen, you at the White House have done an increasingly better job of engaging with us over this last year of this presidency. What about the House and Senate? And this is another aspect, which is this is something that could be done right now.
So now David Pakman wants to make sure that he has access to Democrat politicians in the House and in the Senate, which honestly, with some of them is not as difficult to get. Like I said, Ro Khanna will go on to small shows, big shows. He's a little bit more open. AOC and squad members at one point in time, they did appear on progressive media. That's how I found out about them when they ran the first time. This is going back in 2018. But that has changed over time. There's some people like Thomas Massey that would probably do it. I think I've seen him on other shows as well, on YouTube shows. So there's some of them that will do it, but most of them will not. So what happens when so-called independent media starts to become corporate media? Because that's what David Pakman has become. That's what you're seeing. That's what's happening here. What happens? The reason I would assume that many of you watch independent media is because you don't believe what corporate media is saying, or because you're tired of the BS that corporate media is telling you, or they are omitting information and you want to know more, right? But the more I have, watched independent media or so-called independent media on YouTube, I have watched more of the bigger channels become and sound more and more like corporate media. And it is very troubling, especially when it comes to foreign policy. I see them get things wrong that you know the right answer to, and I see them get it wrong. And I have to start asking, are they getting it wrong or are they doing it on purpose? David Pakman has sponsorships. I chose not to take any sponsorships, and it's not a jealousy thing. I can see a hater watching this right now saying, oh, she's just jealous. No. I'm offered sponsorships every week and I turn them all down because I know what comes with that. So you need to start asking, David Pakman takes sponsorships. What does he owe those people? This is all about access.
As I've told you before, and again, I don't think I'm violating any confidence by saying this thing. When we have a member of the House, we've occasionally had senators, it's mostly members of the House on the show. We work directly with that member's staff. There is no real coordination across shows, Midas Touch, Brian Tyler Cohen, et cetera. It's our team, right? Pat and John make contact and we try to schedule something. And it's always basically a nightmare with a few exceptions. Ro Khanna's team is really good at just like, yeah, let's get him on and he'll hop on his phone and get on. But for the most part, it's excruciating to really coordinate. We finally have made a little bit of contact with AOC now that she's following me and the show on Blue Sky. But for years, we've been trying to get AOC on. We usually don't hear anything back, or we hear, check in a month or whatever. Bernie, same thing, etc. The ask we made was there should be a handoff from the Biden digital engagement team to a contact at the House and a contact at the Senate that can help really coordinate something similar to the Office of Digital Engagement at the White House, so that when Trump's in power and the deportations start and this, that, and the other thing, there is someone that can say, hey, let's bring the top 10, 15, 20 creators to the White House, meet with a bunch of members of the House and Senate, do interviews with everybody, set it up properly in a room that's properly lit with equipment, rather than doing this piecemeal thing where maybe we get Ron Wyden for 8 minutes and then Brian's got Bernie for 12 minutes. And it's completely uncoordinated in this way.
What he is talking about is a YouTube political commentator panel and them being able to just interview bam, bam, bam. Brian Tyre Colin, you interview AOC. David, you interview her next. You get her next. You get her next. That's what he's talking about. And he said the top 10 creators. That means the ones that kiss their ass. I'm just going to say it what it is. He's not going to tell you that. So I'm just going to tell you the ones that kiss their ass. It's not going to be the people that are critical of them. This is what we have to understand. So a lot of the other podcasters that would hold them accountable, these people would never be given that opportunity. What that means is that you would still receive propaganda and BS commentary from these YouTube political commentators that you're already receiving from CNN and MSNBC. How does that make sense? It only makes sense if you're trying to grow your brand, which David Pakman is trying to do. That's the only way it makes sense. Does everybody get what's happening here? Doesn't David Pakman think it's a little strange, a little bit weird that all these years that he said he's been trying to get AOC to come onto the show and it hasn't been able to happen, that she finally decides to come onto the show now because Donald Trump won? Why wouldn't she come onto your show when Biden and Kamala were in office? I think we all know the answer to that, right? So what they are creating, and I've been warning people about this, they are trying to make these YouTube political commentators, the ones that have millions of followers, they are trying to make them the new media, the new corporate media, and where you may get a little bit of a difference on the slant when it comes to certain issues like healthcare, right? Like they're probably not going to say something like, oh, they're going to take your healthcare away. They're probably not going to say that. But they are very much going to say orange man bad. You have to vote for the Democrats or we're totally screwed. And they're going to run cover for the Democrat politicians. That is no different than what you see on CNN and MSNBC. I had a feeling this was coming. Now, he went on to say that people are criticizing him meeting Joe Biden. Where do you hear what he says people are criticizing? This is the funny part.
I can't do anything right. I can't dress myself. I can't speak. I can't light the set properly. I can't focus the camera properly. I can't do mental math. I can't do anything right. And the latest instance of this is that apparently I did two very disrespectful things when I met with President Joe Biden in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago. Let me put this up on the screen for you. Yesterday, I published to my social media, including Blue Sky, which, by the way, is the great place to follow me, a picture of me in the Oval Office with President Joe Biden.
Why do you say this way? Why does he do this way? A picture of me? Like, what is that? What are we doing here? I don't know. What's happening?
I have the picture up on the screen. And if you're looking at the picture, there's a cut. Actually, it's really three things I was criticized for. Maybe you can guess what they are. The first criticism I received is how dare I disrespect the office of the presidency, President Biden, and the Oval Office by having one hand in my pocket while I am shaking hands with Joe Biden.
And I've got one hand in my pocket and the other one is waving a taxi cab. A little bit of Atlantis there for you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's keep it real. Most people weren't talking about your damn hand in your pocket. Most people were talking about you being there meeting with him at all. Most people were complaining because David Pakman was there shaking Joe Biden's hand. And David Pakman is a political commentator who claims to be independent. I told you he's not. He's got sponsorships, which he advertises on his show. And that means that David Pakman is not going to hold the Democratic Party accountable, which he has not been doing. He has not been holding Biden accountable. He made excuses for them about the damn genocide. He's a rabid Zionist. He made excuses for Kamala over and over again. So what that handshake means is I'm with you and you're with me. That's what most people were criticizing. Some people may have said something about the hand in the pocket or what. Most people online were criticizing your ass for being there shaking hands with Joe Biden, because the first thing that we ask is, how you get there? How you get there, David? Wasn't David Pakman crying not too long ago after Kamala lost the election and he said that 10,000 people unsubscribed from him? Then all of a sudden, magically, within 48 hours, 10,000 more people subscribe. So he gets 10,000 back after. The algorithm doesn't work that way. No. That's not how it works. How'd that happen? Who helped out David? He wants to make it about his hand in his pocket.
I don't even know what to say. I Googled this. It doesn't seem to be a sign of disrespect. This was sort of a casual situation. It's really awkward to stand there for a while as the White House photographer knocks out picture after picture, and you're sort of told to move around a little bit so not every picture is the same. At some point, I don't even remember doing it, my left hand slid into my pocket, and alas, the picture that the White House went with as the official picture of David Pakman with the president was of me with my left hand in my pocket.
Why does he say it like that, with David Pakman with the president? Why?
I think it looks casual and cool, but I'm crazy, right? I mean, what the hell do I know? I'm sure, whoever it was, Brittany from Texas knows better about what I should be doing in the Oval Office. So that's number one. That was the biggest one where people said, David, really, really poor taste. What a faux pas. You're not going to be invited back. I'm not going to be invited back, but that's because Trump's going to be in office for 4 years. Second disrespectful thing that I did.
Wait for this
I
one.
wore a light gray suit. Guys, this is like the Obama tan suit thing. David, how dare you wear a light suit in winter to the White House? Well, listen.
No, we don't need to listen to you anymore, David. We don't need to listen to you, because here's the thing. Like I said, most of the people were criticizing you meeting with Joe Biden. If you watch that full video, he'll never bring that up, by the way. He never brings that up. Look at what Tim Black said. This is interesting, because Tim Black has been in this space for a long time, right? He said, David Pakman, a so-called independent commentator, shaking hands with Biden in the Oval Office, says it all. Independent media should hold power accountable, not cozy up for access and profit. Meanwhile, his naive audience bankrolls this sham. Wake up. This isn't justice. It's complicity. Exactly. That's what it is. So don't look towards people like David Pakman and also Brian Tyler Cohen. They are not going to hold them accountable. And if that's the case, then they're no different than corporate media. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.